I'm much more afraid of the people dealing with climate change than I am of climate change.
We are hurtling toward the day when climate change could be irreversible.
Rising sea levels already altering this nation's coast.
China's capital is choking.
The more a country develops, the more you industrialize it, the more concerned they become about the environment.
So, there's that principle in science, Occam's razor, right? Do not multiply explanatory hypotheses beyond necessity, which is the simplest solution, is by default the most appropriate. Now, the same thing might apply with regards to problems, and that's another conservative advantage in some sense. It's like, no, the smallest possible change that will produce the end result.
Right.
Because you don't know what the change is going to do. And that uncertainty, that's part of that humility of conservatism that you described. That is something that's communicable to young people. It's like, it's not like we don't think there are problems, but we're also quite skeptical of grandiose solutions, and even more skeptical of the people who put them forward.
Yeah.
And that's not foolish at all. I'm much more afraid of the people dealing with climate change than I am of climate change.
As you should be, because so this week we're debating this reconciliation bill. And reconciliation just means that you can pass it through the Senate with only 51 votes instead of the 60-vote threshold required to overcome the filibuster. And that means it has to be related to budget items, okay? So not that anybody cares about that, but that's what we're debating. And within that big 3.5 trillion, which is actually closer to 4.5 trillion, depending on how you estimate it, there's a lot of, let's call it Green New Deal provisions. And what a Green New Deal basically is massive subsidies for solar and wind, massive incentive structures for only solar and wind and renewables. But renewables, they really just define as solar and wind, okay? They don't like hydro, they don't like nuclear, and we'll get to that. So it's that, and also a full-on attack against the oil and gas industry, which should also trouble Canadians.
Hey, we're plenty troubled by it. That's for sure. Yeah.
I mean, when even Trudeau is like, "Hey, why did you guys cancel the the Keystone Pipeline?"
Yeah, but he's secretly happy about it.
Yeah, that's true. So this simultaneous attack is unbelievably dangerous for the well-being of people across the globe. It's gonna right away, you're going to see increases in energy prices. You already see it in places like California.
How much? What are we going to see in 2 years? What do you think? $300 a barrel?
Oh, oil? Geez.
Yeah.
No, I don't. The data I see doesn't see that, but you could get up to 90. I just read a Wall Street Journal article today that some estimates are at 90 by the end of the year, which is pretty damn high. I don't know about 300. I mean, but I don't know if they pass this bill and implemented their natural gas tax, which would put a lot of our medium-sized producers out of business.
Yeah, just exactly that.
And also take away the one thing that has decreased carbon emissions back in the U.S. back to 1990 levels.
That's fracking. Yeah. Fracking. Now, which Democrat would have predicted that? Zero. Nobody. No one predicted that, man.
And it just, how that... Nobody.
Nobody. That's right.
No, because it just kind of happened. It's free market. It just kind of happened, and it happened because of a government action. But the government action was just liberalizing it. It was just removing a barrier to it. And the export ban that even Obama signed when we removed the oil export ban out of the United States. What did you just create? Well, you created a powerhouse of energy in the United States, and why is that a good thing? Does that make climate change worse or better? Well, the question isn't, that's the wrong question, really, because the question is, what is demand for energy around the world? And so it turns out demand for energy in the next 20 years is going to go up almost 30%. That's a guarantee. So who's going to provide that energy? It's not going to be solar and wind. All estimates show it's going to have about its same proportion of the energy mix. And so it's either going to be the United States and Canada that actually care about environmental regulations and put all these restrictions and, on a per unit basis. And this is a scientific estimate. It's not the EPA that did it. It was one of our national labs that did this estimate. A unit of natural gas is 42% less emissions than a Russian unit of natural gas. So we're cleaner. We're objectively cleaner when we're giving you oil and gas. And yet this administration, counterintuitively, in an effort to reduce gas prices, wants OPEC to increase production. So we're attacking US oil and gas and trying to get OPEC to increase their production. This is, if you're trying to solve the problem of reduction of emissions, this is
OPEC.
the opposite of...
They're not exactly our friends always.
No, and they want to put
we
Texas
see this
oil
play
and
out in
gas out of
Canada
business.
madly.
Yeah. And so it's just if
Same
we're trying
thing's happening in Canada with regards. Sorry.
Well, I'm just saying if we're trying to solve a problem, of reducing emissions, then fine, let's solve the problem. And the other thing we as Republicans were always wondering is, wait a second, if you really think this is an existential threat and we're done and we're cooked in 12 years, the world is on fire, as they always say. Well, then why not just, instead of the trillions of dollars towards a bunch of nonsense, why not just build a bunch of nuclear plants? Really, why not just build a bunch of nuclear plants? Why don't you have just government-funded
And so what's the answer to that? Yeah, why not? Like France did it.
Their answer is, there's the truthful answer, there's the public answer, and there's the real answer that I think is true. But so their public answer is, their answer is, well, it's expensive, there's safety issues. I'm like, yeah, but on a per unit basis, it's still a better deal. Again, if you think, I thought no cost was too high because we're in an existential crisis. And so I would assume that you think it's a priority to have reliable energy, and you don't get reliable energy from solar and wind, and you never will. It's impossible. And I don't care how far along the battery technology comes, it'll never meet where we need it to meet. It just won't. It's physically not going to happen. And so you need nuclear and you need gas, but they're against it. They're shutting down nuclear plants in California and New York. It's really mind blowing. So it leads me to believe that they don't actually think it's a crisis. And two, that they're mostly driven by special interests in the solar and wind industries that have really captured them. And again, I'm not against solar and wind. I just think they should fit in where they fit in. I don't think they should be over subsidized at this point. I think there should be technology neutral subsidies for carbon reduction that involve nuclear, and it also involve carbon capture for oil and gas. I mean, if the entire point is reducing carbon emissions, then let's make that the technology goal as opposed to just renewables because it makes us feel nice. And it really is about feelings. I mean, I don't think there's any other reasoning behind it.
Oh, there is another reason, I think, is that the ideological morass out of which such ideas emerge is extraordinarily confused, and it's, 30% anti-capitalism and 20%, what would you say, resentment about the nature of humanity itself, and then 40% concern about the environment and our depredations. And so you have that mix, you can't think clearly. It's like, well, are we saving the environment? Yeah, but what about capitalism? Because it's actually the problem to begin with. And so then you get these sorts of solutions emerging. And a lot of them are tainted with this terrible, destructive anti-capitalism, and which seems to be often a more important crisis than the environmental crisis itself.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Green New Deal and what AOC wrote up in this sort of like children's science project. It was very little about the environment and much more so about the substantive change in healthcare and the economy. And it was kind of saying the quiet part out loud, which we all suspected, that this was mostly about the sort of great reset that people talk about. It's kind of more about that than it is climate change. But for you to get you to agree to these really substantive reforms, to this sort of revolution in thinking, they need to scare the hell out of you. Which is why they use terminology like the world is on fire. And it's why they point to every hurricane and wildfire like this is what climate change looks like. I mean, you hear that all the time. But it's really as if we've never had hurricanes, as if we've never had wildfires.
It's turned into another record-setting fire season.
Now the largest in state history.
Really, there's no end in sight.
And as if there's not actually a much better explanation for California wildfires, which is poor forest management, which every study shows. Right. And it's like, let me get this straight. If we all drive electric vehicles today, if the United States stops producing carbon today, are you telling me there's no more wildfires? Are you telling me all of our weather starts to look like San Diego? Are you telling me Houston's not going to have hurricanes anymore? That's nonsense. I mean, that's complete nonsense. And it's not data driven. It's not fact driven. And truthfully, again, go back to UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change data. If the Western world, I believe all developed countries, if they stopped emitting carbon right now, for good. You might get a reduction in temperature of, I think it's like 0.8 degrees Fahrenheit by the year 2100.
Right. And that's actually within the error bounds. So one of the problems with these climate projections is that if you go out 50 years, you can't even tell if what you did 50 years ago had worked because the error bars have are so big at that point. And that's actually a huge problem, because what it means is there's no way of testing whether your damn solution, your large-scale solution, had any effect whatsoever. So how in the world are we supposed to solve a problem like that?
You can't. But I mean, you can't. Like, it's like we don't want to do anything, right? I mean, I listed some things that Republicans are in favor of, and primarily nuclear energy and gas. I think that's that puts us on a healthy glide path towards reduction in emissions. And look, the other truth is the more a country develops, the more you industrialize it, the more concerned they become about the environment. That's another truth. So maybe focus on
yes, definitely.
well-being.
Well, also, with the lefty types, you think, well, they're concerned with poverty reduction. Okay, well, how to do that? Well, how about you make energy real cheap? How about that? Because energy is what does work. And so if you give that to poor people for as close to nothing as possible, then they can do almost everything free. How would that be? So are you so sure you're concerned about those poverty-stricken people? If you look historically, can you really imagine anything that has done more for them than cheap energy? And how would that even be possible, even metaphysically? Energy runs everything. So cheap energy means wealth directly. Virtually no intermediation. So now you're going to make every energy all more expensive to produce these trivial changes in climate that you won't even be able to measure. It's like, what's up with you exactly?